How's it going, everybody? DJ K DuB Omaha, Wired Access Podcast with the All Axcess Granted.
I didn't want that to be the standard. I didn't want someone else in the room to set the standard. I always wanted to do that.
The journey to get there, I think, is something, that is amazing.
Let's get this podcast started!
Suffocation, no breathing, don't give a if I come out, I'm bleeding. This is my last resort.
That's right. It is DJ K DuB Omaha, Wired Access Podcast, All Axcess Granted. Today is raw and real in the trenches as we bring on Coach Michael Rose-Ivey. Michael, welcome to the show, former Husker, and of course now a high school coach down there at Liberty High School in Missouri, back home in the KC area. How are you doing tonight?
Doing good, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. And then, of course, you got a Nexus Trench Performance, premier training hub for elite defensive linemen in the NFL college and high school levels. How's that business going for you and stuff like that?
It's going well. It's something I've been doing for about eight years now. But just kind of finally making it official, getting all the paperwork and doing that stuff. So just really kind of an upscale kind of mentality right now and trying to figure out possibly getting a small facility and kind of working out of there. So just felt good to kind of make it official, get a name behind it. So now I can kind of push that brand and kind of have my own separate thing myself with my own coaching and stuff. So I'm excited to start training in January. Just dropped my website about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So getting a lot of hits on it. So it's a good thing and getting a lot of good feedback. So I'm excited for the training aspect, the training part to begin in January.
Perfect. We'll most definitely get deeper into that aspect because, of course, now, compared to even before you were in high school and when you were in high school, the opportunities and the ideas behind all these training facilities and training programs was just kind of a peace of mind where you might find a guy here, might find a specialist there, but now you guys are starting to come up and help. And of course, the best part is just the history behind who you are as far as you've done the work as far as putting in your own time. And when you put in your own time, of course, being a former KC athlete that came to Lincoln and played for Pelini and Riley, you have the experience that you're able to share. And then the performance and the help with being a high school coach, and just you're able to put it all together. That way you can add to that mindset for these young athletes. And I think those connections are so important no matter the level of people that are doing it, because it's not every coach is for every player. And I say that with all respect, because some people think, well, if I pay the money and I pay this, everything's going to be perfect. But athletes and coaches have to jive and jive and make sure that they come together. But of course, we'll get to where you are today, but I really, love, the history prior to Nebraska or with Nebraska and you're another keystone. This is, we've had BK on here from the Kansas City area. We've had
my guy,
Jamarcus, who played down at Fort Scott and represents that area, and just some of these athletes who have a strong connection that, it's not always about what all you had, where you came from. It's about what you turned it into with coming to Lincoln and stuff like that. But Michael Rose-Ivey, what I really loved is I've listened to you many times on DB's show on multiple channels. That's kind of my connection and how I got hooked up with her dad, and I had a show on the channel, and I just love what really struck me strong was when you were trying to raise money for equipment. And I think, for athletes and people to understand that the availability for some of these athletes that do have the talent don't always have the money to back up to get that talent to have the right equipment, whether it is just cleats, let alone, especially in this day and age, things aren't getting cheaper. Both parents are having to work, or if it's a single household, it's just nothing but a lot of work. And it doesn't mean it all gets to come back to these kids. And so you're able to help out local kids. And it's just something that I really feel like is a very strong thing that goes beyond the sport that sometimes people forget, because it's just something some people might go, oh, it's as little as just some cleats. But
Yeah, for sure.
the difference of what just having the ability to feel like you can do what you need to do because you have the right equipment. You know, you're ready to go and stuff like that. So when you think of like growing up for yourself as a kid in high school, what are some things that you feel like you didn't have, but you made the best of what you had? And then what are some things that you had that maybe other kids might not have had?
I had a dad, who made a lot of sacrifices for me in high school. I think the biggest thing was him putting me in a position to be able to go to Rockhurst, a private Jesuit school here in Kansas City, and to explore like the opportunities that can bring. It wasn't definitely my first choice, being in a, going to an all boys school. I was in a private or public school for all of my life. So, I think that and what it took for me to be able to go there, financially, at the time I had four siblings, five of us, including myself, and my dad and his wife. And, obviously we didn't have everything. We made things work, and they did a great job of providing for us and doing what they can. I think once kind of the realization that football could be an avenue for me, it became something that, was on the forefront, right? That obviously this is an opportunity I can be able to help myself and help my family, my future family, and things like that. And I just think the things I didn't have, I don't miss out on now, being a kid living in South Kansas City, driving about 20 minutes to Rockhurst, just a change in the type of houses you see when you cross over to, that side of the city. And, I used to laugh, my dad obviously is working, trying to get me after working from about 5:30. And, you got kids pulling out in brand new Mercedes, BMWs. I mean, the nicest cars, kids 16, 17, 18 years old. I mean, some real big legacy names if you're here in Kansas City that their family just from the last name. And those things, at the time kind of bothers you, just being young and wanting to have some things and seeing the things they had access to. But I think those things also made me the person I am, kind of just, being in an environment where I'm seeing more, but also knowing that, I'm in a place where I have the opportunity to better my life and better my future. So it wasn't, now I look at it, was not a lot of things that I can say that I really went without. What I did have was a really supportive family, a really strong foundation and support system, especially when you talk about going into playing at the next level, even playing at the level I played at high school, just having people around you to keep you grounded, keep you focused on what the main thing is. I was very mindful and understood kind of the financial situation that we were in when I was in high school. But one of my things my dad always told me, that's not my job to worry about, things getting done. Right? At times I didn't ask for things that I knew we didn't have it. And just knowing that you have people that are willing to sacrifice certain things. Like my dad had a really nice old school car. We kind of got behind a little bit on some things with paying my tuition and things like that. There was a real chance that I was going to get kicked out. And he ended up selling his car, to keep me in school. And just those type of things always, I won't say weigh on you. That's probably not the right phrase, but just things you think about that you try to keep in mind when you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis about how you should go about, carrying the type of person you are,
Well, I think that also feeds into the kids that you're also helping to develop at any level, right? Like,
yeah,
you're speaking from the example of, being able to talk to your dad, but know that he's telling you don't worry about the dollar. But I mean, even going to a private school, I mean, when a lot of people only know public, they don't understand, and of course you see it here in Nebraska. I mean, the biggest thing is which school people are going to. Is this school recruiting? Is that school recruiting? But when you go to a private school, you got to choose to go to that. You got to pay to go to that. It's not just the neighborhood kid. So then like the bond and you could speak on it. Do you feel with that 20 minute drive, your bond is as close with your students, that your peers, as it would be as if you went to the local high school close to you, and the relationship. Because I say this because I remember traveling with my son to go from like here in Bellevue all the way out to Omaha, like by Scott, and
Mhm.
that drive was 30 minutes. But then when it came to friends and stuff, you didn't hang out with the people around you because you're so busy with that sport or with that school that you can't. And then you're like, I got to get home. I can't do all this because that travel time and all those differences. I think those are some of the things that people forget when it comes to chemistry for teams, chemistry for classmates, because you don't have that always together because you have that distance amongst you. Did you ever have that when it came to that school and going through some of that?
I wouldn't say for me, not personally, that wouldn't be my experience. I think I made a good connection. I was lived in the neighborhood for a little bit of time before I went to Rockhurst, so I kind of had a good connection with everybody in the neighborhood. I mean, we had at a time had the basketball goal that everybody comes to, and we had some epic summer nights. You know what I mean, out there and just playing ball, just being kids, having fun. You know, it's probably about 15, 20 kids in the neighborhood that always come around. So um, that never altered how what the relationship was with the people I grew up with. I would say I didn't spend as much time, and maybe it's something you look back on and regret, but I didn't do a lot of stuff. And it was mainly my dad. He was pretty strict, you know what I mean? Trying to keep me focused on kind of what was the priority, which was getting through high school, excelling on the field, maintaining academics and having that to be able to go play at the next level. So, like I said, that support system I had, at the time, obviously you want to be doing what everybody else is doing. And you hear about the stuff on Monday, like, yeah, you missed out and stuff like that. But, that was what allowed me to get to Nebraska and be at that level.
And how did you and your dad come upon and say that football was the route to go? Of course, like you said, multiple sports are available. What was the love and find that you guys found in football in your high school career?
I didn't have a choice. I mean, and it's not like he forced me, but it was like, my parents had me at a very young age. Both my parents were still in high school. So, I don't remember it, but it's people I still run into that went to school with my parents. Like, I remember you was in the stands and you was watching your dad run and play football. My mom was a high school cheerleader. So it was just, it was like, I didn't have a choice. I no lie, my first word was touchdown. It was football was the center of our family, you know what I mean, and kind of brought us together just like going to church on Sunday, right? So I didn't have a choice. It was something that I was born into. But as I grew older and my dad, he had opportunities and experiences with football that could have developed. I think he put a lot of energy into me with the game of football. And if you ask him, he'll be honest with you. He doesn't always feel like that was always positive, and being a young dad, having, several other kids as well, trying to manage that, maybe, there was a lot of pressure he feels like he put on me, to perform at a high level or make sure I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. Some of it is out of honest, just love as a father. And some of it, again, he would be honest with you and say that maybe it's a little bit more ego or, I want to live through like your experience and I want you to reach where I didn't reach, and, that's somewhere where, you talk about that 20-minute drive, you see me and my dad now, I mean, we're 2P in the pods, you know what I mean? But going back in high school, our relationship was somewhat strange just because I felt that pressure at times, and there was some other things family-wise, like outside of him, that I was dealing with my mom that, just brought a lot more, just stress to really my 4 years in high school and just trying to navigate that and just come out of it, feeling like I wasn't letting someone down, or letting people down. And I was doing everything I can to, again, you've got that pressure of trying to, whether it's said or not, like it's not something to table. Hey, we need you to go to play college ball and get to the NFL and change this family. But you just look around, you know what I mean? You look around and you have the times where we're just having ramen noodles and peanut butter jelly, but you have the times where we're eating good, and you see that fluctuation of life, and you're like, I don't want to ride the roller coaster. And I think that's the one thing I'm just super grateful for, that now, my life's in a position that, my son will never have to, hopefully, with life circumstances, doesn't have to live that roller coaster of finances or even emotion, and just kind of what went on in my childhood. So, it's something, again, I think it's a blessing, even with what happened with my career and not being able to fulfill what I thought the level I should have been able to get to, and that's something that I'm grateful now for where I'm at and kind of the journey that took me there.
Well, and you think back to your high school and how you can utilize that stuff today. What's some stuff that you remember experiencing that you knew about recruiting that you're able to share now? And what's some things that you ended up learning that you wish and you kind of might talk to a freshman, Michael Rose-Ivey, to let him know what you wish you would have known?
I think I had a really good plan. Again, my dad was he was on it, so I had the opportunity to be able to play as a freshman in high school. First game I ever played in high school was on ESPN. I ended up making a big sack on one of the top quarterbacks in the country at the time. So when I talk to parents and people ask me my journey, like, it was a little more accelerated than maybe most. I played on a team that had, my freshman year, 3-4 guys that was going D1. So we had coaches and schools coming into the building, and obviously you can't talk to coaches until a certain time period, quote unquote. So it kind of was just Coach Severino, like, he point me out, I say hi, shake their hand, and kind of just go about my business. So I was afforded the opportunity to have that atmosphere, that environment of college coaches already there. But one of the things I did initially was, I sent out a lot of emails, kind of same thing a lot of guys do, but just try to make them personable, like, tell them who I am, but also tell them why I'm interested specifically in their school. Like when I first wrote to Nebraska, like, I want to be a part of the black shirt tradition. With certain other schools, you talk about them specifically. And I think that's something I try to tell guys now, is that you have to be, everyone's sending out the brochure and the flyers, that's just what everyone gets, but if you want to show interest, right, you're going to make it personable. You're going to talk about, hey, if I'm a coach recruiting you, hey, I saw your last game, you caught 4 passes for 75 yards, a good run on X, Y, and Z. And I think kids can take that approach as well and be personable with the coaches. Like, if you follow a coach and you see he's interested in grilling, hey, man, coach, I saw you where you threw down a crazy steak. But you got to find ways to make yourself noticeable and get yourself to the top of that list. Because once you send your message, 10 seconds later, someone else sent theirs. And then 20 seconds later, somebody else sent theirs, 30 seconds later. So now you're going down. You have to make yourself stand out. And I think the biggest thing I've learned now with recruiting is I try to get more understanding of how the NIL really works, beyond the glossy numbers you get, right? So being able to have, a little bit of access to some guys that are at that level, and then are kind of experiencing it. I've gotten a little bit more understanding of that. That's something I'm trying to get a better understanding of as I continue to work with guys and train them, and they get to that level as we develop them. That's something that we can help them with and help navigate that with them. So that's the biggest thing that now that it's a wild, wild west. I don't think anyone really knows how it's really going, besides those that are putting ink to paper and dotting T's, or crossing T's and dotting I's. So recruiting has definitely changed. I would tell any recruit that's listening to this, go where you're wanted, especially if you're a senior at this time. Shoot, even if you're a junior right now, and you really look around and you be honest with yourself, and you look at your measurables and say, hey, I'm a D lineman, I'm only 5'11", I'm a linebacker, I'm only 5'8", 5'9", and I have to think, right, if I don't have the height and the stature, is just what it is nowadays. You have to have a very elite trait. Do you have elite quickness? Do you have elite speed? Are you a ball hawk? Do you force turnovers? Having a good IQ is good, but I need somebody that can get to the A gap in 1.5 seconds, not 1.8, right? And that's a thing that you have to talk down. A lot of parents, well, my son, he had 120 tackles, or my son had 1,500 yards. Ask, who are they playing? That's the first thing they're going to, who are they playing? And unless you have that just dominant athletic trait or athletic stature, no matter what level you play, they're going to definitely help or look at those guys and give those guys the opportunity to play, at the highest levels before the guys that may just have really good IQ. So it's definitely changed. And I tell people again all the time, go where you're wanted. If you can go somewhere one time or 1 year and get film and get up to the next level, and that's your goal, then do it. I don't think there's any shame in that, and talking about that now too with how recruiting is going.
Well, and I mean, Wheels, just quickly speaking, I mean, but like even your own personal thought, like you think of Dayton Raiola leaving, like some people thought it was all this big bad thing. From my personal take, if I was thinking exactly what you just said, go where you can play or you got opportunity, the opportunity for him was not the same as Dylan to come here. And if I am him, I'm looking to play at the next level, not sit back and relax. So it's like I was hoping, and I don't know, I don't need to know, but from my eyes looking in, I would say that would be for him having the opportunity. What was kind of your thoughts being a person that obviously talking to high school kids who have to think of that aspect of it?
I think there's a lot to that. I don't necessarily need to get into it here, but I think there's a lot with that beyond, beyond maybe what we all know. I think there's some things that probably some conversations were had, just understanding kind of what the quarterback room is looking like, obviously with Latif and, his kind of, obviously had some rough 2 weeks, but, his play, kind of what he's brought to the table. Also, you have a guy in Trey Taylor who's recruiting his tail off, coming in too,
And we'll
in a
have
couple
him
of
on
years.
next week.
Yeah,
Just had T. Ellis, his partner.
Yep. So,
he's odd when it comes to that.
Yeah, so I think there's some things there that, like Rule said today, like he likes the quarterback room. Hope everyone can come back, which I'm pretty confident. I think Dylan will come back. I don't think that's a deal breaker. Like as a family, hey, we're everyone, we're all out, right? I think there's just maybe a level of play thing that, hey, we feel like we got some guys that are going to be able to push the needle at the quarterback room. And again, it does come back to him. Like, hey, we've been around you. We built this relationship with you. We care about you as a staff, right? And we want you to be able to go somewhere where you can go develop and go play. And again, you don't know what Dayton's what his priorities are, right? If it was, hey, I want to be a guy that, when Dylan leaves, I want to be a guy that's in the talks for that quarterback spot, then, again, everyone has to be realistic. And I think that's, again, going back to the recruiting part and talking to parents, again, you just have to be realistic, right? You have to look around, observe the room, right, with no bias, and say, hey, can I play here? Can I excel here? Can I develop here? And you have to look at, hey, what is my end goal of going to college football, right? Or playing college football, right? Do I want to be a guy that, just getting my degree is good enough, right? And I'm gonna work my tail off, but if I don't ever become the guy, I'm not gonna stress over. It's not something I'm gonna 5-10 years later gonna still be, angry at the world I didn't reach my potential, right? So.
And I didn't even take the risk to chance it, right? And go, hey, I can possibly go somewhere. And when you think of like your, your process, and you think of your recruiting, and you look at the colleges, what was some of the experiences with some of the colleges? I don't need names, but some of the things that you might have to dig in with your athletes to explain of what's real wanting you and what's, hey, I'm going to shine to show that I think I want you, and how you found your real feeling, and Lincoln was the place.
Again, my process, it was just so different. I think the biggest thing when you talk to a lot of the people, and how do you know your priority? Obviously, if coaches are calling you, in that time period when they're able to talk to you and reach out to you, when you're not able to really have those phone conversations with those guys. Obviously, like I said, everyone gets the mail, everyone gets the packages, things like that. But with how Twitter works now, and I mean, likes aren't even public. I'm sure coaches, you put a highlight tape up there liking. I mean, they're showing you interest. I think for, again, a lot of people just understanding, what type of player you are, where you can fit at, where you can get developed at, not only on the field but off the field, I think was a big thing for me. I was fortunate. I got offered from Nebraska going into my junior year, so coming out of my sophomore year. And from a camp, I had some conversations with them. Like I said, again, we had coaches coming in and out of the spring, so I've been able to meet quite a few. I would be what you would call like a camp circuit guy. Like I went to any and every camp I could. Went to a lot of camps down in Texas, Oklahoma. Again, my dad had a process that, honestly, I really sit down and think about it, wrote it down. It probably would be pretty good process to duplicate for people now. But I wasn't afraid to go compete. Like, I went to Florida and did things. Again, I went to Texas, I went to Oklahoma. I got outside of Kansas City. And the biggest thing was, though, see a lot of people just go. I mean, they put out their camp schedule. No one, at least I've seen their highlight tape. And, the camp schedule is all big time Power 5 schools. And they're like, man, you're just paying some GA's lunch bill. You know what I mean? Like, again, just being realistic about where your opportunities were. And that was my first Nebraska was my first offer that I received. So, again, it kind of accelerated my process and, opened me up to other schools. Obviously now Nebraska offers. So, here comes other schools that offer as well. So that was a fun process. It was really cool, getting some fun phone calls, talking to some coaches that, now are pretty big names, and just other experiences. I only did one official visit, and it was with Nebraska. I really didn't visit a lot of the schools. My dad was a really big Nebraska fan, and kind of
into Nebraska, and like, how did that start?
Just in the 90s watching them, just in the 90s watching them, 80s watching them too. I think it really started when they played Miami in the 80s, and I think the whole family was kind of going for Miami. And I would consider my dad's probably a contrarian. Most probably would consider him that. So I think it started from that. But I don't think me necessarily when I was growing up, I don't think it necessarily rubbed off on me. I was just a big college football fan. Like I just love football. That's just was always my thing, and always something that I've been a part of, and I've been engaged with. So
what's the city of Kansas City rooting for when it comes to college football? Like, if you had a reference what the city is like, what's the real vibe in that Kansas City area for who you're rooting for? I mean, you guys got
it's probably like 30. I say it's probably 30% KU, 30% Mizzou, 20% K-State, and then a little sprinkle of Nebraska, Iowa.
Okay.
Iowa State, a lot of those type of schools. But there's a nice little population of Nebraska fans. There's actually a Nebraska bar, a couple of Nebraska like bars that'll play the games and stuff, and kind of do a big deal about it every Saturday. So there's definitely a big pocket of Kansas City Husker fans that's down here.
That's what I love to do. Anytime we go traveling, if there's a game on, we always try to find the Husker bar, and so many places have them, and it just feels nice when you're in there. You just feel you're in a wanted place.
Yeah, no, there's a chance going and all that. It's
and there's like
cool
people
experience.
that run it. It's like really cool. Like, there's people that will run it that will make sure, one, this always happens. Two, there's prizes for every score, halftime, and always something to keep you a part of the Husker family. And that's what I love about it when you go from town to town. So, of course, you choose Nebraska. What's some of the early things that you remember with Coach Pelini, and of course, you went through 2 defensive coordinators, so obviously we could get a little bit into that part of, because I've talked to JoJo Doman, who went through 3 defensive coordinators. Like, people don't understand, like, nowadays everybody is like, I'll transfer out. Okay, DC's out, I can transfer with whatever. But back then it wasn't like that. You had to reapply yourself for those processes. It was something early that you learned it with the Pelini regime and all that for you.
I just thought, when I look at the trajectory, just kind of being in hindsight, the trajectory of Nebraska, like, coming out of the Big 12, obviously, have 2 close Big 12 championship games with Oklahoma and Texas. Well, Oklahoma wasn't that close. But you have that, but then you're moving to the Big 10. And there was a lot of momentum. Bo was winning 9 games and was creating a buzz for Nebraska football. Nebraska's defense obviously with Sue, Levante, Dejon Gomes, Alfonso Denard. I mean, those guys, Adam Carrick. I mean, you go on the list and on. Just the quality of defensive guys, and we haven't seen that type of talent at Nebraska on the defensive side of the ball since the early 2000s. Definitely in the late 90s. So just being a part of that, I still vividly remember going on my official visit for the Ohio State game, in the rain, sitting there kind of miserable, like, dang, we're gonna lose Ohio State. And then Levante makes that huge play, and then the game just changes. And it was definitely a fun night to be a part of and kind of witness and see. And I was hooked. And even though my dad, I would say somewhat coerced me into committing when I was a junior. Pretty much every day after I got offered, he would come in my room and was like, "You ready to commit yet?" And just kind of doing it. I don't know if he's doing it jokingly. And I was at a point, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go ahead and just get this over with. I feel like I'm gonna do this every day. And but I definitely grew to love it, just being in the tunnel walk and being a sophomore, and junior and walking through there, people knowing who you are and things like that. And that's the first place, that's the first college football game I've ever been to was at Nebraska when they played Baylor, and just seeing the atmosphere. So I was spoiled in that sense that, even when I had USC offered, Ohio State offered, and Oklahoma, and some other local schools, but I didn't have necessarily a desire to go to a lot of those places because I just felt like where Nebraska was headed, the trajectory, the prominence they had on defense. You had Taylor doing what he was doing, running all over the place. The backs and the offensive line. I look back at it, and I really genuinely thought you couldn't tell me that we weren't going to be in a national title contention within the next 2 or 3 years. I felt really confident in the recruiting class we brought in. One of the best I think Nebraska still had, at least in recent years, in 2012. And, I expected that. So just, the biggest thing I remember is just when I first came in is just expecting to be in the national scene and be a prominent program again. And somewhat unfortunately, you look back at it and you see now that, we're not there yet. And just so badly want to be a part of that. I remember we used to sit in the locker room and talk about, like, man, if we were the ones, if this was a year, we were able to, get to the Big Ten championship, do it, like, man, we would, we'd be kings pretty much. Like we have everything made. Like it wouldn't be anything we would need ask or want ever from anybody that's affiliated with Nebraska. And just like having the desire to get to that level. And I think I know fans understand that desire and the pressure that comes with playing in Nebraska, knowing you're trying to be the group, right? You understand the national perception. You don't even need the national perception. The perception or the reality of what's in that locker room or what's between those four walls and the way you guys are playing. There's just I think there's a lot of pressure, and that's kind of the biggest thing I remember is just having that pressure and want to do that, and then kind of see things spiral. And Bo leaves, and then Mike Riley comes in, and kind of the first year, which was a struggle. Man, so many stories from that year that it was not good. It wasn't. We were just, I think as a team, we were just hurt. That Bo was really gone, right, and we had a different kind of structure there and things like that. But then that second year, we start 7-0, doing really well, beat Oregon, lose to Wisconsin in overtime, and then kind of everything goes downhill from there. But it's just a great experience.
I mean, if it really felt like you almost had to go through the motions because you didn't know what motion was coming with that, and you have that big of a change in your career. I mean, you didn't have to experience it in high school. What was the biggest thing amongst the players that you were not able to get out of what you thought was in the way? Do you think of that whole thing? Was it the fact
You're talking with the transition
with the
Riley
transition?
I just think it was just different. I mean, we can everybody. I mean, to 120 guys, there's not one time probably one guy hasn't got cussed out by Bo, and probably some a lot way more than others. But it genuinely was something where you felt disappointed when you let him down. And it's just kind of like that father figure, that authoritative guy, that just it was an absence. And I think the biggest thing was, especially with that senior group that's obviously stayed and played for Riley, I think there was just a lot of emotion, that just wasn't. It wasn't. There wasn't a lot of healing, and there was a lot of, I would say, grieving, looking back on it, how guys just, maybe didn't carry themselves in the way they wanted to, or just not being themselves. And we had a lot of injuries, a lot of devastating injuries that year as well. And it just made it an easy target to obviously say, the different change in culture, and structure. I mean, you lose a guy like Dobson who had been there for a long time and established a lot of things, and you had some things where older guys or former players felt like they couldn't come around, and there was kind of this like, we want to kind of hack the whole ties between the Pelini, and so it was just a messy breakup, just how it all happened. And I think that senior class kind of took it the hardest, and it was a struggle. I vividly remember us having a nice team, a very, very big team, large team brawl before we went to on our bowl trip. Was it where did we go that year? San Diego, I think.
Yeah, with Cotton.
Yeah. We had a
brawl.
Yeah, it was a nice little. It was just a get everything out kind of thing.
Okay.
I mean, and Mike Riley he was not if anybody started. I mean, you started pushing the guy. He's sitting you down on the sideline during practice.
Yeah.
And they let us go. They let us go. It was a lot of frustration, energy. I mean, it was just a simple, pass over the middle, defensive guy hit the offensive guy when we're supposed to be thudding, and I mean, it just got rowdy, and then we end up going out to UCLA and beating them in the bowl game. So I mean,
would you say there was too much on both sides? Was there too many that was totally all in for the change is the change, and then you got the other half they're like you said, kind of in that funk of, damn, this is really happening.
Yeah, it was definitely a split. I mean, I think too, just the vibe. I'll be honest with you, just the vibe of the new guys that were bringing in, because then you got to remember that was the whole Calabrasca thing, and it was just, and there was some cool dudes that came from that, kind of that group, but it was just, it felt like, even for me, and I was, kind of one of the first people to meet with the staff. Like, I'm excited to kind of see what changed and all that stuff. But even for me, like it did feel like there was a fraction of, hey, these are our guys, and then these guys, and you can join these guys, but these are going to be our guys, and that's what it felt like for a lot of guys. Just being honest, and it got better in year two, just with, I think, us going through that first year. And going through the adversity we had to go through on and off the field, I think that really benefited us going into that second year, and us playing a lot better, as a team initially in those first 7 to 8 games.
When you think to this time, what, of course, you mentioned multiple times your dad had a plan. He knew exactly what he wanted you to do. He knew the route that you wanted to go, and you see this turmoil going on, and this, of course, will change who you are. It will change your projector. You'll have different coaches that could change who you are. What was that like with him? Was he kind of just letting you go through it, or was he kind of, worried, or, what was his thoughts that you remember going through this? Because, I mean, he had a strong will of where you're going to be, to the D1s, schools.
Yeah, I'd say, well, when I got to college, it was kind of more hands off. I mean, I think, I just think in general, me, obviously on my own, and, fending for myself, he, respected that. And, just, he obviously was there to lend an ear, but also give his opinion. But it wasn't something at that point where, I was on my own, and in the decision I make, obviously he would give me counsel, but not necessarily, telling me, this or that or the other, just, really just focus on what I can focus on, because at the time when they came in, I was coming off of my ACL injury. So, for me, I'm looking at, we got a new coaching staff. What's my role here, right? Is this, they look at me like, well, this guy just, tore his ACL, what are we, do we want him here or not? And that was kind of the biggest reason I wanted to be with him, just, hey, kind of what's their plan, kind of how they see me. And, I had, a pretty decent relationship with Coach Bray at the time, and, was able to transition, obviously, and get fully healthy and play some good ball.
And when you think of these accomplishments up to this point, and you think of, showing your family, you said you got a big family with a lot of siblings. how do you remember this pressure, you being able to see that it just made your family stronger, and the people that are younger than you are, of course, watching everything you do and learning. And I say this because Jamarcus was Harrick was one of 11, and he
Mm,
said because he did what he did and got to Nebraska, his family realized and they started doing great things or trying to apply themselves to see what Big Brother is doing. Because it does take life changing. And I say this because me and my wife, we had our first kid in high school too. We
mm,
didn't have the same guidance, but we continue to show our kids this isn't what we're going to do. We're going to be different, and you're going to be better than me. You're going to accomplish more. I have, a high school teacher or a elementary special education teacher for my oldest. She graduated. I have 4 kids that went through high school, no kids. So they've done more than we have already there. I have another one
mm.
trying to be a lawyer, but you're like, they're all accomplishing better than what we were. And obviously your dad that was his goal, was to put you there to be that example. How's that went for you up to this point?
I think the journey experience is obviously lending me some things that just experiences, both good and bad, that I see now that I can help not only other people navigate through the various life challenges, but even myself, because I think sometimes we forget we also are still a work in progress, even though we've been worked on. You know what I mean? Even though
Yeah.
we've gone through our different journeys, and I think that's the thing I try to just be mindful of. Just, and it's cliche, but just trying to make the future self appreciative of the decisions you're making now. You know what I mean? And then making your past self, just I would say, just grateful for your progress. And I think, when you're dealing with young people, first you have to let them know, obviously, there's some things that are extreme, but there are no absolutes as far as you made this decision, this is who you are, and I think it's important. I'm very, as much as I can with high school kids, I don't mind sharing my story and telling them kind of, about myself and who I am and what I'm about, and how I've stumbled or tripped up in certain areas, and where I can help them. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm learning, because I was always an X and O guy. I've had playbooks, full playbooks detailed out, 12, 13-year-olds. So I've always been an X and O person. And, it's kind of been a good thing. And, been coaching high school ball 9 years, a good thing, but also a curse, because, you spend so much time with that. And I think the biggest thing I'm realizing now is you have to be able to build meaningful relationships with people. And especially with these young people, sometimes they're kind of almost weirded out or freaked out by genuine relationships,
Yeah.
and that's one thing I try to pride myself in, is try to build relationships with these kids and give them access to the realest version I can give them, up to us being, obviously having the buffer between me being an adult and a high school student. But, I think it's important that we don't show ourselves as this perfect being or this person that never made a mistake, or, that walks around flawed, to know that I'm also going through battles. I have things that I deal with mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally on a day-to-day basis. I just saw, the new head coach for Oregon State. He had a great quote that I'm gonna have to steal. He, says, we all coming from a little bit of brokenness, and we carry around a little bit of brokenness. But he says he tells himself in the mirror, somebody needs you today, big dog. And that's kind of I feel like, that quote kind of found me, because that's kind of been how I've been feeling. Like, regardless what you're going through, like, somebody's going to need you. You talk about kind of your future person, like that future person going to need you to make the right decisions, whether it be eating, sleeping, drinking water, doing just simple stuff like that, or the big stuff like making the right decisions, financially or just in your personal life. So, I definitely, what I've been through and how I've managed that and gone through that has definitely helped me as become the person I am today.
No, I like that. And then, you talked about, struggles and stuff like that. When you think of your ACL injury, what's probably the hardest thing that people forget about? We see it happen more often. We see that what people forget is the mental part that an athlete has to go.
Mm,
I mean, because you just went from where everybody wants a piece of you, wants you to be a part of something. Okay,
yeah.
now he's back to he's got to get himself better. And then, oh yeah, hey, here's a big coaching change. Now you got to really figure it out. And now what are you going to do? Like how did you go through that process alone that you can really help other athletes through these injuries, because you do feel alone for a little time there until you
For
find
sure.
the icing on the cake to get you up and over that hump at the top of the mountain.
Yeah, I you know, my ACL, it was it was a struggle. I mean, if I can be quite honest, you know, just mentally for me, just, you know, again, football being my life, it being my passion, it being what brings me joy, but also allows me to, you know, demonstrate a certain aggressiveness you can't show, you know, off the field. And, you know, not having that, that was the hardest part. You know, I ended up having to go into, you know, taking counseling and talking to a therapist about, you know, why, you know, I need the game of football so much, and just going deep diving kind of into my childhood and kind of how that impacted me, and just kind of going through some things. And that was the hardest part for me. You know, the physical part, the rehab wasn't hard, but what I was dealing with mentally and emotionally made it harder. You know, and I feel like that's why the year I came back, right, I ended up tearing my groin, because I don't feel like I was just necessarily, you know, on a spiritual, physical, or emotional level, ready to be back in the arena. You know, there's a time you have to put in, you know, there's a grind you have to put in when you're doing those type of rehabs in order to be 100% ready, and your body being ready to be back in the fire. So, you know, the biggest thing, anybody I know that has those big time injuries, I always recommend Tim S. Grover's book, Be Relentless. One of that book, you know, really changed a lot of my mindset going through it. At the time, you know, Kobe had tore his Achilles, so he had the Muse documentary. I think I watch that every morning when I start my rehab. Just seeing somebody go through the process, and obviously cameras are there, so you're seeing as much detail as he's allowing you to see. You're not seeing the hard days where it's like, man, hey, cut it, just cut it. Like, I don't, you know, I'm not feeling today, and that's the raw part of being injured. Is it's like this. It's a big roller coaster, because it's, you know, you're going up and you're playing really well, you're doing X, Y, Z, and now you take this big fall. And I think the biggest thing guys struggle with, and it sounds egotistic, but the biggest thing people struggle with is not being wanted or needed anymore. Right? I don't need you to make that play in the A gap. I don't need you to catch that ball. And the attention, whether how you receive it as negative, positive, or, you know, to extreme, to where you get a big head and you can't handle any type of feedback or correction, that's missed. And that's something, it took a while, even for me, not playing. You know, I would say it took me probably about 5 years, 6 years out after, you know, I went up to the CFL for about a month, got cut from there. And that's when I kind of knew that I was done, but it was just still that lingering feeling. I was coaching, I was training, and just, again, not having that, not being like, I don't need you to go do something you've been doing all your life, you know, and just getting adjusted with that. And I think that's what scares a lot of guys with those big injuries, is that, hey, maybe I won't have this opportunity. But one thing I did find, I found some other passions. Like, I found a passion in making music, you know what I mean, and doing that during that time, you know, obviously playing video games and stuff like that. But, like, you know, again, I looked at injuries at a certain point, because I was getting hurt so much. You know, I had the ACL and the tore my groin, had some other stuff dealing with. I was like, you know, this is just another way for me to relearn my body, you know what I mean? And that's kind of how I started to take it mentally, and that's how my rehab process started to improve. And just tell anybody, it's always going to be tough. It's going to be a long journey. There's going to be more days you don't want to do it than you do want to do it. But again, right, your future self needs you, and you have to be mindful of the process, and that you're not going to take one big step. It's going to be small steps before you can be able to get back to where you want to be. So, and it took me about 1.5 years to really feel confident and play ball the way I wanted to play. So, you know, always want people to attack the mental part of rehab just as much as the physical part.
Do you think nowadays, with the way social media is, that for these athletes that are getting hurt, that there's even more pressure for them to get back sooner? I mean,
Yeah, and I think I did that as well. You know, I mean, I did like a little hashtag. I was like, just, I think sometimes you put more pressure on yourself when you're highlighting, you know, your journey back. And that's a good question, because I just thought about that. You know, just I think when you know different than okay if in your relationship, right? You
Yeah.
know, if I'm putting every single time, me and the wife going to Dave and Buster, me and the wife, hey, we're doing XYZ. Oh, I love my wife. All right, well now you stop messaging or you stop putting those things on social media. People start to wonder, well, what's going on, right? Why are we not getting those? And I think that's where that pressure comes from. That you have to feel like you have to live up to. Oh, I'm getting better. I'm grinding. I'm doing XYZ. And you know those times when you really don't feel like doing it, and you go into that. I literally went into, a depressive state in a sense of mentally, where just not going to class, not showing up for the people that was supporting me and loving me, and just those type of things. And when you go through that kind of that dark time, when you feel like your role has been diminished, whether it be on the field or just in life around other people, it can get dark and it gets scary. And I think that added pressure of social media can do it. Some people can thrive in it. Some people like, hey, that's what gets them going. Like seeing people say, hey, keep grinding. Just saying that support. Maybe that's something that they need on a certain day. So I think it's individualistic too. But again, for me personally, I look back at it now. It probably did put a lot more pressure on myself to try to accomplish certain feats during rehab. And maybe I could have paced myself in certain ways or just been more focused and mindful more on that than kind of getting obviously some praise or encouragement from somebody, but what does it really mean, from Husker 17538, what I mean? Like, what does it really mean? When you got real people right next to you that's taking out their time to help you get better. So it definitely is individualistic in how people can handle that type of pressure and that approach.
See, and it's just crazy because you think even like right now, of course, you went through a defensive coordinator change. You're seeing Nebraska nowadays go through it, in this year. What do you think are some similarities for yourself when you had to go through it that the players are going to have to go through now? But what are some things that obviously might be a little different in this day and age? Because, I feel the 10-year just isn't going to be as long as everybody feels it's going to be. And especially with the open transfer portal, open this, that, there's just so much avenues that a player can go that I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the same as like what you had to go through, or even those before you, like
Yeah.
with Jojo Doman. I just don't think those are the same. Where you feel like you have to go through it, you could just decide, hey, I'm going to opt out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I see, one relief was, I'll say this with Bo leaving, was our defense got way simpler. We had, we called it the Bible. I mean, it was about 425 pages of, obviously he coached at the 49ers, coached in Green Bay, did what he did, at the college level. So he's amassed a lot of knowledge, a lot of stuff that he's put together. And we have to know it. We have to know it. I tell people all the time, outside of the cover 3 structure and middle field close stuff that Nick Saban runs, Bo Pelini's defense is the 4-3 version of Nick Saban's defense. I mean, it is very detailed. You will see things that, this looks like this coverage. Nope. There's one small detail here that changes. And that's just that NFL mindset of, last guy with the piece of chalk, per se, as they say with defensive guys, trying to make sure if we call a call, we want to be perfect in everything we do. So that was a big relief. I think with what they've been doing, I wouldn't necessarily think the verbiage is super difficult. If I'm just being honest, when I'm watching the defense, I don't see a lot of, split field, man match stuff. It's a lot of zone drop coverage stuff with, different front structures. So I think the words or the verbiage or the new language they're going to get, it may get more difficult, but I assume, right, like you said, with the process and how things work with the transfer portal, you have to keep things pretty digestible, right? Because either you got somebody you just got from the portal in January, or you got a young guy just came in summer, in May. So you're kind of caught between a place unless you're at a school like a Georgia or Oregon, a school where a coach has been there, has had his system intact for at least 3 to 4 years, where now, right, everybody has ran this system with some type of experience, right? So I look at, for us and us going from Coach Banker from Pelini to Banker, that was a big relief for us that, the defense got simpler. Now, simpler in language doesn't mean it's better, right? It doesn't always mean it's better, but it may allow you to play freely. But that's one thing I always, when just coach talk, when people, like we want a defense that plays fast, we want a system that plays fast. Well, I mean, we can play fast to nowhere, right? We still got a coach. You still have to put guys in the right position, and you still have to make adjustments as the guy with the headset on. So, that's kind of the best thing for us when defensive guys, when we got the news was, well, at least we don't have to know 1,000 different calls and know each structure and things like that. So it got simpler for us, and we'll see kind of who the guy is. I definitely have a guy I would like for them to really go get, but we'll have to see what they look like.
So, of course, if you think back to when you played and you think of, the goal is to get to the championship, and you think of what has happened post, Michael Rose-Ivey, and you think of where they're at now, and what's some of the things that, we just can't find to get us back to where we want to be? Is it strictly like being a player, sometimes some players still think of what would be changing, and sometimes you turn into kind of the fan player where you're kind
Yeah.
of thinking as what you would think. What's some of the thing that you think has really been ailing Nebraska for the latest to not get them over where they want to be?
And I'd say the biggest thing is just I think the biggest thing overall, if you're lumping in, you can lump in some of Bowles teams, Riley, Frost, as well as rules, just situational awareness and situational dominance. I think those two things be the two things, I think, regardless of the coach, and that's something that's just as, again, I'm a fan, I'm a former player, and I'm also currently a coach. So my hat, it's going all over the place, right? I'm trying to figure out which one to put on at any point, and I've obviously, you think hard about, hey, what would I do, in this situation to get this figured out? I think the biggest thing, again, outside the situation where the situational dominance. When I say situational awareness, obviously, understanding, game management, time management, rotating guys in, even getting the right guys in, in certain situations. And situational dominance, obviously, winning on third down, not putting yourself in bad situations. And then when you have opportunities to beat a team and defeat them, you defeat them. But outside of that, you have to be able to win the trenches, and you got to find a way to get big, strong guys and develop them. I think one thing, and people may not like it, I'm going to say it. One thing I think Iowa does really, really well is they have a system for their interior or for their D-line and outline guys. And they're not going to go look at guys and try to find the biggest stars. They're finding guys that say, hey, we have seen this type of player. Again, but this is a benefit of having a coach who's been there 20 plus years, where we have a system that we know, we have seen, hey, we changed Joe Schmo to Jimmy Joe, right? But we've seen the same 6'4", 275-pound freshman guard come in here, and we know exactly how he's going to develop in 4 to 5 years. And there's an understanding that there's going to be development. We're not expecting guys necessarily to come in right away. But in order to do that, you have to have a foundation of players to take you to that next step. And I think this group had a chance to kind of do that, right? Maybe a better performance toward the end of the year would have allowed for Nebraska to get maybe a couple more wins in the 2026 recruiting cycle in this early sign-up period. And it's no different than, we all play college football 26. How mad are you after you lose? Not just because you lost, because like, oh my God, the number one recruit now is not going to want to come to my school. And that's real. I mean, that's the real of it, right? You got to be able to win and close out opportunities so you can have more opportunities with possibly better players. And if you don't do that, you're going to continue to get the same type of guys in there. So I think there's a systematic approach I think they can look at and take it towards recruiting with just local guys, get more north, right? Because going to the south, I think, is a little bit tougher, right? A lot of money's swinging through the SEC. ACC, Miami's obviously down there. Big 12, you got teams from Texas Tech spending all the money in the world off from oil. I think there has to be maybe a shift in where we're trying to get our guys, right? Go compete with Wisconsin for some old linemen. Go compete with Iowa for some guys. Get in those same regions, in those same areas, and try to find guys that can dominate up front, have some length, right? And, obviously come from really good football programs and play quality ball. So I think that's the biggest thing. I think there could be, in defensively, they're going to see a different defense coordinator. So there's going to be a different philosophy with the type of guys up front. But I think whoever comes in, there has to be, we talk about a pipeline, that has to get back to what it truly means. Not just being a group of guys we pick and pluck from different areas. Like we are getting our O linemen from this 200-mile radius. And if a guy has to either has a high interest in our program, or we feel like we can really go get him if he's not in this radius, but we have to put a point and say these are the guys and this is the area we're going to look for our big guys, and not necessarily look at the stars or the athletic potential and things like that, but just guys that are going to play tough, hard-nosed football up front. And if you find a couple of those guys that are really good freak athletes, of course you want to go get them. But you got to find. I think there has to be a bigger culture shift there with the guys you get than any position group. Right, with these, that's a Nebraska offensive lineman. We see an Iowa offensive lineman when we know that when we see it. Oh yeah, that's an Iowa guy right there. That's the type of guy they mold and they put in their program for 3 to 4 years, and he becomes better than where he came in. I think that's where Nebraska has to get with their front seven, included with those linebackers too, and finding guys there too. I think that's somewhere they can continue to look for guys that continue to play fast and just play physical at the point of contact, get off blocks and make tackles. But we say that, we talk about it. It's not,
it's not click of the hands. There we go.
Yeah.
Well, that's just it. If you think of the D line, you think of a Ty Robinson, you think of a Nash, and how they got to be who they were, and even Nelson, just how they got to be the athletes they were. It wasn't year one. It wasn't year two. Those guys were in 4, 5, 6 years of finding their way. And I think that reality is hard to find, but it's something you build up to, like you said, with consistency and growth. And, when you think of what, before we get you out of here, there's two things. One, what's the legacy that you felt you were able to leave with Nebraska, with being a guy who was able to make these big transitions? That isn't normal for Nebraska, right? There's only been a couple of these times where things have happened like this. And then on the other side, where do you see Nebraska going here with the bowl game and then in 2026?
My biggest, I don't know. I respect Nebraska's history, to be honest with you, with like a lot of reverence. Like I think I have I'm a blimp on the radar, of something much, much bigger, and I think I've accepted that, that just my career, like I feel like there's a lot of other guys that left a way bigger mark, on the program, and just those things that, I don't look necessarily think about my legacy in Nebraska, if that makes sense. It's just not, it doesn't compare. It fails to compare in any fashion. So it's like, why even, you know what I mean? For me, at least, like I look at like Levante and even, Will and what he did, but even the guys before that, T. Farley, Foreman, all, just a bunch of guys. I can go down a list that, like, I think a lot of fans don't understand, like, I'm really a Nebraska fan. Like, I really studied, like, the rosters and the teams, and my dad's made me watch the games, on YouTube. Like, I'm genuinely a fan. So when I come with my approach on X and things like that, like, again, I'm 3 different hats. I'm juggling them, right? And so, I look at just, I was able to, make some plays. There's people that tell me, hey, my favorite game was this game, maybe the Oregon game, or, whatever game. And I remember you playing, and that always brings me joy when just those individual people just, I made an impact on them. And I've always been a person that make, reach one, teach one, hopefully they can teach two, you know what I mean? Just kind of that multiplying type of mentality. But I would say, as far as Nebraska, I'm not sure what bowl game they'll get. Just want them to be competitive. Obviously, we'll probably see some guys we haven't seen get some more snaps. depending on the situation. So maybe some guys to get an opportunity to get rolling before it's that talk. Hey, we might need to talk about you getting the portal so we can open up some spots, and kind of assess what your roster is going into 2026. Obviously getting defensive coordinator is going to be important. Rule saying that they're going to have a big input on the defensive staff is very interesting. Even Rule's press conference in general with the comments he made about Butler was interesting, but it's still, I talked to a lot of people about it. It's not surprising. I think the tone shifted, and you can kind of see between both with how they were discussing the defense. And I want to, if we got a little bit of time, kind of talk about the quote that everyone's talking about. Where Rule said, don't tell me guys aren't good enough. And I feel like it's so many layers under that that I think a lot of people
just sit on one. They just sit on that.
Yeah, they're sitting on that. They're sitting on that part of it. I'm like, it's saying this is. I don't want to say it's ain't not personal, but there's something about the way something came off in the approach that Rule had to put us. He had to say this. I'm drawing a hard line. And whatever that is, I mean, I don't think it's malicious or anything, but I think there gets to a certain point when you're a very driven person and you're trying to surround yourself with people of like mind and like vision, like passion, and respect the approach you're trying to go with. Any type of division, especially when you're in the trenches like a head coach in Nebraska is trying to get this program out of the mud, I think you have to feel, and people can say maybe it was defensive, as far as, but I don't think it's just a surface. So I think it was something in the approach, and I think Rule said it. Something changed, as far as just getting the guys again. Play 11 as one, and you got to find a guy that does that at a high level, that can recruit and develop. Has a system that you can duplicate year in and year out. And I think that's the biggest thing we kind of saw with the structure. You talk about having the guys like Robinson and Hatch, right? It looked a lot different, with those two guys playing in the A and B gap than it did this year, and the things Butler had to do to try to make things work. And I think it was just, hey, I think on both ways. And I'll be honest with you, if I can be honest, I don't know how much of that was Butler's true defense, and I think it may be something more so with Rule and where he wants to go with the program, and less about where he thinks Butler can take the defense, right? And obviously you had to run concerns towards the end of the year, but I don't know how overarching Rule's control is over what scheme. Now, he said today he doesn't care what scheme it is, but understand the guy who took over Phil Snow is a big 3-3-5, 3-high safety guy, right? Who was there also with Tony White, a 3-3-5 guy. So at some point there's a system it feels like you want to run, right? Yeah. And maybe, again, that's why I say it maybe so more so a Rule than Butler. That Rule is maybe coming to the point, okay, maybe I'm beating a dead horse here. I need to get through the season, give the guy somebody that knows how to run this system, get it through a game, and we figure out what is the long-term development of our program. How do we go about creating a system and approach that can get the right guys in here continuously, no matter whether they're 4-star or 2-star, because we plan on getting a 4-star developed to a 5 and a 2 developed to a 3.5, right? So we're going to count on our bank on our development. But it'd be interesting to see what kind of scheme they bring in. I really hope they look at the Toledo defensive coordinator. I mean, I've heard a lot of other bigger names. Jim Leonard, he would be great. I'm not sure if he's sitting and waiting on Fickle to finally get out of there, but they just gave him extension, I think. So I don't know what they're doing in Wisconsin. But I really think he would do really, really well. His system is actually, I mean, maybe you hate to say this out loud, but his system is actually very similar to Banker's. And they're 4-2-5 base, heavy quarters, very simplistic in what they do. But when it's time to get third down, they get a little more exotic and things like that. But be really interested to see. Interested to see that. Also see what happens with the defensive staff. Obviously, I think Rule said it. Williams is probably gonna stay. With his recruiting efforts, you got to keep him. But sounds like again, sounds like, he's not to his standard. And I think he's a guy that's obviously very prideful coming off his stint with the Panthers. And I think it got to a point, it can't happen like this again. He said, if I'm going down, I'm going to go down, my way and doing it the way I want and getting this done, getting it the right guys in here. And if there's any type of feeling that you don't feel like we can get this done here with these guys, because there's a point, right? And I think this is the biggest thing being a coach, right? I've been on a team, like my biggest thing with this year transition, I went from being a head coach on a team where we won, I think, 11 games. I don't want to short myself on my career record, but I think we won 11 games in 3 years to this year we won, I think, 11 games this year, right? So big transition, coming from a school that resources weren't as pleniful to a school where everything is there. Yeah,
people don't understand, and I always talk about it. Like, my last class that I was there was with Noah Fan at Omaha South here in town.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he went to Iowa, and he's kind of my big push to why I do a lot of what I do, because I saw how people treated him and how they treat recruits. And I'm like, these are 17, 18-year-old young men making a decision for them and not you, the fan. And then when you think of, like, at Omaha South, we probably, we won the most games there at the end, but it was like 4 or 5. But our goal was more to get the 60 kids we had to finish something in life.
Yep. Way different
more
goals.
About that than it was about those big wins. Don't get me wrong. We had fun and a lot of it, but we were just like you said, where you go from a team that's, 11 wins in 3 years to 11 wins in 1 year. The mentality of even yourself is something that had to grow with that.
And change into it. Yep.
So
it's not, it doesn't just happen,
No, it didn't just happen. Well, I appreciate your story. I appreciate you sharing your time with me, especially on a weekday, and just giving a little more insight to not just who Coach Rose-Ivey is, but also some of the things that you went through that, I just hope people look at it. And I'm just like you. If we can reach an athlete, one student, one parent, especially those parents, and just take some tidbit from it, whether it is the mental, the physical, or the opportunities. But also, I allow you to also give a quick shout out for what you do have come up with your Nexus Trench performance, and tell people how they can find you so we can give that shout out too.
Yes, sir. Nexus Trenches performance is something near and dear to me. I've been training in Kansas City for about 8 years now, working with high school, college. Had a couple NFL guys, 2 Super Bowl winners for the Chiefs, Tershawn Wharton and Damani Harris. Work with those guys during their stint here in Kansas City. And it's been a big joy for me. It's really gave me my second win, to be honest with you. I really had like a bad girlfriend breakup kind of thing with football, where I was really trying to do everything to go away from football. I ended up accidentally coaching. I was doing some training sessions, and a parent saw me, called the high school coach in their community, and I had a job offer the next day. And this has really been a big passion for me, and just something that's been able to, just get me past, kind of what I feel like, where I just feel like I fulfilled, what I set out to do. And I, looked at myself as a younger person and wanted to do with football. But, training guys has been a great thing for me. I have a lot of guys that sign their deals or sign their offers today as seniors. Yeah, so I had some guys do that across the city, and even one guy is going to be going to Drake that I coached this year at Liberty, George Richter. So it's awesome. I think it's always one of those things, and I'm never a guy, like, I don't, I highlight obviously who I work with, but I'm never a trainer like that's my guy like that, because especially nowadays, kids work with a lot of different people. They can be with you for 10 weeks and you don't see them for another 10 and they're back again. And, I'm just more a person. I'm just always grateful to be a part of the journey, you know what I mean? And just be able to lend my expertise, my knowledge to them, it gives me a lot of joy. That's one thing I'm thankful that I got over, my own self and kind of what I thought I left a lot on the table as far as, the things I could accomplish with football. But I'm very much, if I can say so, proud of myself for, just being willing to be, just being, I guess in the more biblical sense, be Moses, right?
you're
Yeah,
vulnerable.
but more so in the being Moses in the sense where you don't get to reach the promised land, but you've led people there, right? And I think
Yeah.
there's almost a bigger thrill for me, a bigger joy of seeing guys go through it and giving them your expertise, leaning or letting them lean on you when they're needing something, but also just being the silent guy in the bleachers, just you know what I mean? And I think that's the most important thing. And one of the biggest thing is I talk to my trainer community that we can do sometimes that just golf clap on the side. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be the focal point. You don't have to be the main thing in the video. Just, hey, like, man, appreciate it. And, when you get that public recognition, yeah, that's cool. Blast that out for sure. Cause it is a business, right? You do want more clientele, but also just understand for the right reasons, whatever your reward is, that's up to the Most High and what the universe is going to bless you with. So I just always try to keep myself mindful of that and just staying even keel with that. Just knowing that you're helping, right? You're not the show. You know what I mean? You're the guy that's getting people to the next level, and where your blessing comes from. That is where it's going to come. So appreciate the opportunity.
You
to
said
talk.
that right there, like that. It just continues to push why I love what I get to do, because I had a radio show. I lost it for a year and I went through that mental stuff. A lot of it's just weird.
Same stuff, yeah.
Because these are why it's so important. Why I love that, a lot of the stories that I bring up and I get to talk with the athletes that are already done playing is a lot of the similar stuff, right? Like where all you needed was one guy to just reach out. I had a guy go, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast?" I'm like, yes. And it was like a year later. Now here I am running 3 podcasts, constantly trying to just post for these athletes. And every so often you'll get a parent that will just post something. I had a dad go, and it was for a Class C school up here, because my son got more college coaches reaching out to him, not just for football, even though that's what I posted about, but basketball. And it's like those little nuggets to me just push me to do what I do even more genuine, because even with yourself, it isn't like I came to, I mean, I know I've interviewed other athletes that you've played with. I could easily went through them and then go, "Hey, can you get Rose-Ivey?" I could ask DB, right? But instead I went for that. Hey, you know what? I want these always genuine. So I appreciate you sharing the genuine story, giving the fans of Nebraska, but also any athlete out there, what we do here. And I really want to say a big shout out, as I always do, to Character Chronicles. Adam reached out to me and wanted to bring this podcast onto his network. And that's huge, because that tells me that the stories that we continue to tell and the journeys that we get to share on here is something that is impactful to something that his brand is, right? And something that we're always trying to help. And then, of course, the Omaha Beef, I greatly appreciate them. Because they help me with the StreamYard. And of course, now I do their podcasts, of trying to regrow people to understand, like, these are opportunities beyond the game. We obviously were blessed with Tommy Armstrong, as one of our players, and what he did to the Omaha Beef, back to championships, back-to-back MVPs. And, and you think of that full circle of every time, it just resorts back to what? The same even kill of where we were and where we are is never the same. And we're just trying to help you who is listening, who's watching, just get that one nugget to go. That's that 1%, right? Every athlete has to find that 1%. So I greatly appreciate everybody that tunes in. Wired Access, All Access Granted. And like I said earlier, next week, we'll be on here with Trey Taylor. It'll just be on a Tuesday instead of Wednesday. When you deal with some of these college or high school athletes, those schedules are hectic. And it's not the same. So thanks again, Michael. I appreciate your time, and have a good holidays with the family.
Yes, sir, man. Appreciate you guys. Go Big Red.
Yes, sir. Go Big.
The standard is the standard. We set the standard.